Welcome to episode 35 of the Brewed Sages, Stormbound players with a head for the game. I am Freeloader, and with me as always is Subaiku. Subaiku, how's it going tonight?
Fantastic.
We are the Brewed Sages, easily the second best Stormbound related podcast in production. And as a reminder, you can follow us at Brewed Sages on Twitter. Or for all of you who ever memorize the opening line to Rapper's Delight, our email address is thebrewedsages@gmail.com. So, Sabaiku, it's actually been a little while. People in the Discord even noticed that episode 35 was conspicuously missing for a little while. We've finally gotten around to it, but this has been a fairly busy month for both of us.
Unfortunately, it has. Not as much Stormbound as I'd like. Real life is getting in the way. I just moved recently, so packing up a whole house full of stuff and trying to unpack it somewhere else is quite the project.
See, that's your big mistake. You should just do one giant yard sale and sell everything and buy new when you move into the new place.
I thought about just lining the street with dumpsters and seeing how many of them I could fill up, but unfortunately, my wife and my kids really like sitting on couches, so I had to
Mm-hmm.
move some stuff.
Well, that's different. My children like jumping on couches, so
Yeah.
I'll suggest that they try sitting, see if that doesn't change
Good
things.
luck with that.
Yeah, right. But that being said, the game has been progressing. Things have been changing. We would normally be publishing our meta report, but believe it or not, we're going to pass on it. It seems like the real life bug biting us. We are not the only victims of it. A lot of the committee that we rely on for the meta report were unable to do the survey this month. So we actually don't have adequate data to publish. Hopefully, in July, we'll be able to do so again. But for the month of June, then, Sabaiku, it's just kind of a question of, well, what have you been seeing?
Yeah, it's unfortunate to talk about this anecdotally. We do like to bring as much data as we can to the discussion, although I will always be the first to admit that our data is really biased. We have a small group of volunteers that help us out. So it's certainly not indicative of what you will see on your climb. We don't have the ton of data that Sheepyard has, but we try our best with what we can do. Um, Anecdotally, I can say I'm still seeing a ton of Ironclad. I'm still seeing a lot of Swarm mid range,
Mm-hmm.
and Swarm Rush is a not insignificant chunk of the meta either. I see Shadowfen mid range, and to a very lesser extent, I see Winter Control slash heavy mid range. It's a lot of Ironclad and a lot of Swarm still. Um, and that's, I think, part of the reason why we haven't been as engaged. Part of the reason why a lot of the player base hasn't been engaged is just that this is another month of balance changes, just not really impacting the meta significantly. And I don't want to say that in an accusatory or derogatory fashion. I am not upset about that because I do think overall that the game is in a very good state of balance right now.
Oh, for sure. The balance is fantastic.
I don't want them to come in and just make changes just to shake things up. Instead, they've been, making changes to some cards that are not widely used, like Counselor Ami, making changes to cards that are widely used, like Unstable Build, and all of these are trying to bring those cards into a state of balance, but not to the point where it's so unbalanced that it really changes things. The experimentation with Ami, I do still see an Ami deck every now and again. It's a nice surprise, but uh, it's not something that is out of control powerful. At least not at the Diamond Heroes League level.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really enjoyed seeing all the experimentation with it at the beginning of the month. My reaction to it at the time was, this is neat, but I feel like Zuri is just more reliable.
And I think we said that on our second episode, our first episode of the month, after we had played with the balance changes a little bit.
Yeah, I
And
think
just,
that's right.
it's Zuri is just kind of more immediately impactful. Ami is better in the longer game, but in general, the deck doesn't play defense well enough to want it to go into the longer game.
It is still a really neat mechanic. I really love the card. And to your point, I also appreciate the idea and the fact that a card that was effectively unplayable is now legitimately playable. It's not
Oh yeah.
tilting the it's not tilting the scales. It's not shifting the balance of power within the meta, but it is now another card within your library that you can slot into a deck if you're looking to change the play style up or just experiment with something that's fun and new and different. So I do like that part of it. But in
Yeah.
terms of what I'm queuing into,
So, and that's what's interesting here, I think, and that's the direction that I want to take this conversation.
Mhm.
The archetypes are staying the same. A lot of the games feel the same, although there are individual card choices that will take me by surprise. I played against an ironclad deck with wind makers. I don't usually see that. It was good to see, and thankfully I had kind of played around it anyway because he seemed like he was running some slower stuff in there. Um,
Okay, okay.
but like overall, the game kind of just felt the same as running into any other heavy mid-range ironclad deck, even though an individual card or two is changed here and there.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I think overall I do agree. I am not seeing as much hearth cards, for example, as I did. The unstable build might have shifted that a little bit. But I've been seeing debug loggers again. So the ironclad that I've queued into have been playing around with a more greedy mid range, not looking to try to finish the game off as quickly as they are trying to develop inevitability.
Yeah, Joshua H had popularized the ironclad build, or the Merc maybe started it. I don't remember. But
Hmm.
the ironclad build had gotten a little slower and a little more defensive with Loris and Siren instead of Hearth cards anyway. Debug loggers is a nice alternative if you don't have Loris at a high level and you just want to slot something in there. Yeah,
It
make
clogs the
it
board up well.
exactly. You're not playing as much defense, but you are just kind of like clogging up the middle of the board and hopefully setting up your own attack at the same time.
Yeah, the other thing that I've seen that took me by surprise at first, but now I think has become the more standard for Swarm Rush. There's now almost inevitably Vindicators in the deck. It seems like the meta has slowly shifted to the idea that try to get all the damage you can early on like turn 6 or 7 with Forgotten Souls, and just try to get the last couple with Chip.
Yeah, I think that Thomas Petrie had been posting in the Discord a similar swarm deck that's very rush focused and then tries to finish with chip from Ubis or Vindicators. I played that a bunch this month actually, something similar to that at least. And it works because, like we just talked about, a lot of the mid range decks were slowing down. And the best way to beat a deck that's starting to go slower is to go faster instead. They can't play as much defense. You can kind of get the early damage that you're looking for so that 4 points of chip from the Vindicators is enough to close it out.
Right.
Going slow is one way to try to beat a greedy mid range deck, is just to try to outvalue them and just add more and more value. But you get to a point where you are now vulnerable to a rush deck, and going with the rush decks right now is not unreasonable. But I gotta say, rush in this game has never had it harder. I think between everybody running the low mana guns and Hunter's Vengeance or Loris or Void Surgers. I'm seeing Void Surgers a
No
lot.
way, really?
Yeah, like
Wow. Okay.
people people are that want to play defense have a lot of opportunity to do so, and it's just never been harder for a rush deck. But with that being said, like, it's still, a lot of these decks are slowed down so much to the point where you can still come in underneath them.
Well, I actually rushed all the way up to the Heroes League. I think it took me 3 days at the beginning of the month to just push and get up there using my Make Nuts Great Again deck. which effectively plays like a rush Shadowfen deck plus a little bit of chip over the top. And I think that rush right now is actually in a great spot. I have to agree with you. I have to agree with Thomas. I think that the push in the mid range has gotten, I don't want to say out of control, but in fact kind of into control. The mid range is getting so greedy and so top end heavy that it was a super easy climb to go through diamond this season because of, I think, that issue. I was just flying through players one after the other. I sometimes I couldn't even tell what kind of deck they were playing because they just played so few cards before I put the lethal down.
which is a nice feeling
It is,
when
but
you're
at
the
this,
one
yeah.
committing the lethal.
Luckily, my deck doesn't really try to do anything all that fun, so I didn't necessarily walk away from the games feeling like I missed out on something. Like, oh man, I really had this combo that I was hoping to get to, and like that kind of thing didn't happen. But a little bit more interactive games probably would have been more fun, especially considering I was streaming them and they were just very short and very quick and very matter of fact kind of when
Yeah.
so
It's not a fun screen. It's not a fun stream when there's no discussion around what play should I make here? What card should I throw away here? When it's all very straightforward. Yeah, not very interactive, but
No, well that's my fault for playing that particular deck. I don't know if you recall, but last month I was struggling on the last day or the last 2 days to try to break into the Heroes League. So I just wanted to make sure that didn't happen this month. And success.
good.
um, yeah.
Knock it
So
out of the way early.
exactly right. So moving on from there,
No, I
though.
don't want to move on yet.
Okay, let's not move on yet.
Even though we're talking about how the meta feels a little stale, people are continuing to innovate out there. One C, one Curtis throwing down some crazy techs in the Heroes League. Check the Discord, check the fluff, check the high end decks channel.
Mm-hmm.
Arthas is back with in the Heroes League with his Chonk Beam deck, which is just looks like so much fun to play. And I think that might be it, once I get enough gold together, I'll make some upgrades. It might be something that I'll try out next season. Um, so there are people continuing to innovate out there, and there are people demonstrating that a lot of things are viable. So why are we not seeing the majority of our opponents try new things or adopt new things?
I think there is the tendency, at least from me, when I see a base health 20, I assume they have a full library. And that's not true. In fact, it's not even close to true. I achieved a base health 20. I think I had 8 or 9 cards at level 5. So my gut tells me that a lot of the players that are obstinately sticking to whatever deck they have, that's the one deck they have maxed out that they feel like they can rely on to compete with at the highest level that they want to play at, whether that be platinum to diamond or diamond to Heroes League, whatever it is. I think it takes a while to develop a new style deck within the same faction, and even longer than that to develop a deck from a different faction. So if you've been an Ironclad main, it'll be easier for you to switch from your classic Ironclad Rush, for example, and just slowly try to get 2 or 3 cards for mid range. But if you want to jump from there to like winter, good luck. It's a long climb. It's several months to maybe half a year or longer.
So you think it just all comes down to the coins? Like you can change up your deck. You can put one card in or put another card in, but you can't really overhaul the whole thing because it's just too expensive.
Well, some of it is because it's too expensive, and some of it is just the limited size of the libraries. I mean, if I really enjoy, let's say I really enjoy Winter Control, right?
Yep.
Even if I have a complete library, how varied can I make Winter Control decks? They're all
Yeah.
going to have Gift. They're all going to have Ulf,
They're all going to have guns. They're all going
right?
to have, some sort of early game defensive tool, whether it be Hunter's Vengeance or Beast of Terror or Edric.
Sure. And you make 3 or even 4 card changes, and you'd say, well, that's a 33% change to the deck. One of the things that I have learned from playing my Make Nuts Great Again deck, that deck runs Chestnuts and Needle Blast over the top. Those are bad cards. They're not good cards. They are successful in this deck because this deck is built around using them, right? But in general, like basing your deck around Chestnuts anymore is just not really all that viable. I will tell you that if you build a deck with 10 super strong cards, like Shadowfen's Core, the guns with Ubis, right? That's what I've got. And then you have two cards that do whatever. It could be Sweet Cap and Hair Raising. Why not? Whatever the last two cards are, you're going to cycle them like literally 9 out of 10 games. You just never play them. You play the other 10 cards. You'll be very, very successful. If I didn't have Chestnuts and Needle Blast in this deck, and I put any two other cards in, I don't think my win rate particularly changes much. But also, I don't think the cards I play in the vast majority of my games change much. Like if you made them, I don't know, Big Thrust and Summon Militia, maybe they would see a lot more play. But in general, I just cycle those last two cards. So even if I'm playing, a greedy winter deck and I'd want to put in like Crazy Bombers, Crazy Bombers is only going to see play in 1 out of every 8 or 9 games anyway.
which is a shame because Crazy Bombers is a lot of fun to play.
It is. It's a great card. But my point is just even when somebody chooses to adopt a new card, especially if it's a more expensive card, the number of times they're playing it in a group of 10 or 20 games, it's very, very limited. So the net result to all of their opponents is they see effectively the same cards they would have seen if they played that opponent last month or next month when Crazy Bombers gets taken out and something else gets put in, like Avian Stalkers.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's a great point. Changing one card doesn't actually change things for your
No,
opponent much, although it will change things for you.
exactly. Even changing 4 cards, because two of those cards you might never play anyway. So it's really, even though you think of it as a 33% change to the deck, it's really only a 20% change to the cards you're playing every game. It's just really hard to completely scrap a deck list and start over from scratch with all new sets of cards. There's just the libraries aren't that, the cards in the game are not that diverse.
All right, now we can move on.
All right. So from there, speaking of resource acquisition, one of the ways that a lot of players do choose to try to gain more resources is through the brawls. And we've had a huge overhaul to the brawl system this month, Sabaiku.
Out of nowhere, just a day or two before the brawls were set to start, all of a sudden, Sheepyard makes the update that there will be no longer just one brawl. There will be 3 running brawl events per week with 3 different difficulty levels. Casual brawl is limited to level 1 cards and 12 base health.
Mm-hmm.
Usually equals matches are 10 base health in level 1 cards. Here they decided to bring it up to 12, and I think that that's the right choice. A lot of the brawl modifiers are increased strength. So, for example, we saw the rodent brawl this week. I think chaotic people with increased strength would just one shot a base health 10. So, great decision to give a little more flexibility there.
Yes, although I would point out that the pirates with 2 movement means that Lucky Charmers can kill anybody too. So we already deal with being one-shotted in some of these brawls.
The second difficulty level is capped at level 3 cards and a base health of
14.
14.
Mm-hmm.
Then finally, the ultimate brawl is the one that we have been playing up until this point with a level 5 card cap with up to 20 base health. And the cost per match there is unchanged. The cost per match at the warrior and casual levels are decreased significantly, as are the rewards that you earn.
Yeah, I would also point out there is something else they added, which was a turn limit. So there is now the possibility of a draw in these brawls, and the turn limits are actually different for the 3 brawls. So casual, If you go past 10 turns, it's a draw. 15 turns for warrior, and then 20 for ultimate brawl.
Which seems like a lot, but it is potentially a viable strategy to just gain base health and stall the game out and hope that you can get your victories by running out the clock instead of by killing your opponent. Not the way that I prefer to play for sure, but I'm sure that there are people out there who are going to try it.
I mean, I enjoyed playing fatigue decks in other games. So I love the idea of there being now a draw potential. I don't know if there's any plans on implementing it in ranked, but I actually additional win conditions, and I guess a draw isn't really a win condition, but additional ways of sort of finishing a game aside from just dealing damage to your opponent's face.
Yeah.
Uh, I like it.
And just something to make sure that a game doesn't stall on forever. A way to just cut it short and say, you know what, both players, good job. But that actually only happens if the turn timer runs out and both players have the same amount of health on the base. So seems unlikely, but it could definitely happen.
Well, the turn timer will trigger regardless. The game's over at that point.
Right, but that it's a win or loss.
Correct.
Normally, whoever has more base health when the turn timer runs out will win.
Right. I do think they kind of had to do this as a way of handling the issue that before, when I hit Brawl button, I was queuing into a match against potentially any other person who was also hitting the Brawl button at the same point. Now, at best, I have a 33% chance if we assume that the distribution across all three brawls is equal.
Yeah, definitely. This seems to be a change where they're hoping to attract more players to the brawl for sure. But man, you are definitely distributing those players across three different pools, and that's going to make it rough.
Well, shortening the games might help. Might help there being less long queue times. Although my experience this week, and I know this was just the first one, I mostly played the Ultimate Brawl. My queue times were pretty long. I don't know how it was for you.
Yeah, it was very much dependent. So I did not play a ton of any of these. I played the Ultimate Brawl up to the Mythic Pack. I
Hmm.
played the other two up to the 50 crown milestones, the Fusion Stone reward there. Um, so not too deep into any of them, but I tried to get a little healthy sampling across the board. And definitely, I found the shortest queue times at the lowest levels and the highest queue times in the Ultimate Brawl. I still did run into, I think, like one base health 16 in the Ultimate Brawl, one or two, and then everyone else really was 18, 19, 20, which is what I would expect. Uh,
Yeah, that's exactly
you
what I
know,
would anticipate as well, right?
so I do think that this is a positive change for newer players. Newer players now have game modes that they can use that are maybe a little less punishing than running up against base health 18, 19, 20, and getting blown out. But unfortunately, the high base health players do have to pay for it a little bit with the queue times. But I never got kicked out of a queue. I never failed to find a match. It was just 30 seconds longer, 60 seconds longer than I'm used to.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing happened to me. And it was not all base health 20s for me either, although it mostly was. There was definitely some 18s. I don't remember seeing anything less than an 18. But I, I actually had one loss overall across all the brawls that I played, and I played only Ultimate and Warrior. So my one loss was in the free game section, so before the first milestone of the Warrior Brawl. I lost a game because the game froze up on me, which seems to happen give or take once a week. I'm still not sure if it's not just an issue with my local Wi-Fi, or whatever it is. But I seem to have this issue where once a week a brawl game just kind of locks up on me for a minute.
Yeah, I did have an unfortunate interaction in the same way in the Warrior Brawl, where I just thought to myself, "Wow, my opponent's really taking his time on his
Oh
first
no.
turn here," and then realized, "Oh no, this just completely locked up," and I ended up skipping my first two turns, and yeah, I did not win that one when I reconnected. So you did not run up against the three loss limit then that reset your progress if you only lost once due to a connection issue.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the little X come off, and I was a little annoyed by it. Although not overly stressed because, well, it's the free games.
Yeah,
um,
no, good point. I ran up against it when I was trying to close in the Warrior Brawl when I was trying to
mm.
close in on the 50 crown milestone, and lost one to disconnect, and then lost another one just because it does happen sometimes. So it was a little worrisome to try to queue into those last couple games and make sure that I won them and didn't get reset back down. But I was very early on, so if I did lose and had to pay more gold, it wasn't the end of the world. It's not like I was losing a ton. I don't know how people are going from 160 to 200 crowns, 200 to 250 crowns with only three losses. That seems pretty inconceivable to me.
Well, so for those of you who don't know, uh, also added into the new Brawl system is that if you lose three times, not three times in a row, but three times in between two milestones. So once I hit, let's say, the 10 fusion stone, this is for the ultimate brawl, 10 fusion stones, that's 50 crowns. From there, my next step is 70 crowns to get to the mythic book. So because I'm winning five crowns for every win, that's four games I've got to win. If in the midst of those four games, though, I win the first, lose two, and then win a second, and then lose again, I reset back to 50 crowns. Um, Obviously, the further you go, to Sabaiku's point, the more wins you need. For example, from 200 crowns to 250, those are two separate milestones right next to each other. So you have to win 10 straight games to go from the five legendaries to the 200 fusion stones. You are allotted the opportunity to lose a couple, but as soon as you lose that third game, you reset back to the lower milestone again
And lose 500 coins per match that you sank
that you
into it.
sunk into it. Yeah, that is for sure. Now, the one time where you can lose your third game and not get reset is in a situation like, let's say you were literally at 49 crowns and you lose the game. You gain the singular crown for the loss first, bringing you to the new milestone at 50 crowns. Uh, and then the third strike gets removed anyway because you just hit a new milestone. So if you're ever right on the edge and you're like, well, I better win this because I don't want to lose it and drop all the way down, you won't. Even the loss will bring you up. But at the end of the day, Sabaiku, I this seems like it's already an anxiety producing section of the game because of just how much gold you have to sink into it, and which we've talked about ad nauseum about how precious gold is in this game, the economy being what it is.
You're already gambling a significant amount of resources on each individual game anyway. Why did it need to be made worse? Um, and again, this is not really punishing players who don't go deep into the brawl. This is if you're going 50, 70 crowns in, you're losing some gold, a hundred per match. It's not the end of the world if you lose a couple hundred coins. um, this is really just punishing players who are trying to make a deep run into the brawl. And the only reason I can come up with is because it keeps them playing more. Unless you have, like a 95 to 100% win rate all the way through, you're gonna hit eventually 3 losses, and you're gonna then have to go back and play more games than you would otherwise play.
Would I? See, that's the thing is I don't have all the gold in the world. And so if I'm pushing to the mythic even, right? So let's say I'm at 66 crowns or whatever, and I lose and I drop all the way back down to 50. That's a lot of gold I now need to spend again, right? Even with the premium pass, that's 90 coins a game I have to pay to queue back in.
So do you just
Oh,
walk
I'm
away
sorry,
at that point?
135. 135 coins per. I do. I think I walk away. I mean, I haven't been in the situation yet, so I don't know. But if I've sunk in, what is that? Let's say 4 or 5 games at 135 coins each, working my way to the mythic book, and then I hit my third loss and I have to start back over again at 50. I probably just say it's too expensive for me to try to push again. I can't afford to go 3 losses again.
But you're coming at this from the perspective of a player with 1,000 to 2,000 coins at any given
Mm-hmm.
time, not
Yep.
not a ton of accumulated resources. This is mostly, I think, a tax on the players who have 50,000 coins or whatever. If
Well,
you're
but it hits me harder. Like, not for
you're
nothing.
you're maybe losing a larger percentage of your coins than they
Mm-hmm.
are, but
Mm-hmm.
you're also much less likely to have this happen because you don't need as many wins to get up, right? Like they need to win twice as many games as you to get up from 160 to 200. You're trying to go from 50 to 70, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
You need 20 crowns. They need 40 crowns. That's in an ideal world, 8 games, but realistically, it's got to be at least 10.
It can't be 11.
Can't be 11.
That's true. You have to now make the 200 crown from 160 with no more than 10 games. Otherwise,
or
well,
you
actually,
just
it could be
eat
11.
or
Yeah.
you just eat into some of the resources that you have accumulated, and it costs you a little bit extra to play the brawl than it otherwise would, and
Mm.
maybe that's not the end of the world. You're basically being taxed so that you continue to make the queue times short for everyone else that you're queuing into.
I mean, I think you're right that must be the reason why they're doing it is so that players who are going to play to the 200 crown or the 250 crown limit, regardless of how much it takes to get there, because they just need the 200 fusion stones, right? Or the 5 legs. Maybe this is a legendary they really need copies of. But those players would now keep playing regardless. So that's a lot more queues, and that's a lot more opponents then that we get to find the us plebs trying to grind our way up to like the 70 crown limit. The problem is it does impact us too. I don't know how often it's going to, but it's definitely there have been days or weeks I should say where I go undefeated to the fusion stones and then I lose 4 games in between. Normally I set myself up with 1 loss early in the free section. I'll just concede a game before I win the humble book, and then from there I will normally hopefully only lose 4 more games the rest of the way to the mythic book. Some weeks all 4 losses are after the fusion stones,
Yep.
so this will hit me.
Yeah, it will eventually. I do agree with that. And that it's unfortunate. And I think that you're right. But you and I are not in the position to spend a ton of gold on the brawl because we're not looking for the additional resources to come at that kind of cost. So we'll
Right.
probably just walk away there. But maybe we won't.
I mean
Depends on the
that
brawl,
that's
I guess, and what the
that's
modifiers are and how our collection looks.
in if I'm paying for the premium pass, I usually get 3 mythics plus the 4 from Brawl. So that's 7 a month. If I have to pass on one of those, that's a pretty big chunk of the cards that I'm going to accumulate that month.
It is, but you can accumulate resources in other ways now through the warrior brawl, through the casual brawl, where it costs a little bit less, and maybe you don't end up getting quite as much, but you can work your way up through 80 rubies on the casual brawl at no more than 65 coins per match as your
You
highest.
60 rubies?
There's a 60 rubies milestone, but you
Yeah.
also on your way there will get 5
Oh,
and
that's true. 5
15.
and 10. Yeah, yeah, okay.
5 and
Yeah, yeah.
15, right? So you can
Mhm.
get a total of 80 rupees just by playing the casual brawl, and it's still going to cost you a significant chunk of coins, probably with a good win rate, probably somewhere on the order of 900 or so is my guess. You can always use the brawl calculator on stormboundkitty.com to check that out for yourself. Um, but there are other ways to get the resources now. You don't have to spend it all in the ultimate brawl.
Yeah, but I look at the rewards from the others, and my knee-jerk reaction to it is these are fantastic, and I wish they were there when our libraries and our levels were lower. Because early on, when we were playing in gold, for example, I would have been all over the casual brawl. That
Yeah.
like playing in silver and gold, boy, that would have been fantastic to have. Now I look at the rewards, and for the number of games I'd have to play to get there, it's
Well,
just
yeah, and you're right. It's a
they
lot
don't
of
move the
games to
needle.
get there. The reward per cost is good across all the brawls, right?
Hmm.
Some milestones are more important than others, or are more worth it than others. Depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Some of the milestones are, rare cards or epic cards in in the lower level brawls, and the ultimate you get the legendary instead. Maybe you don't want those particular epics because they're not something you play. But make that decision for yourself, for sure. But in general, if you're working your way up to a fusion stone or a ruby's reward, it's a good cost as long as you have a decent win rate, but the amount of time you have to invest to get there is a lot. Now, you're spending that time in a brawl that you enjoy, hopefully. So maybe it's not a factor, but if you're a casual player with a limited amount of time, you're going to look at those milestones and think, wow, that looks really great. I'm probably not going to get there for one brawl, let alone all three.
Right. Yeah, I think that's true. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this change to the brawl. Not for myself, because I think for me, it's mostly just going to be the ultimate brawl like it always was. At the end of the day, aside from my queue times being a little longer, I don't think this really affects me much aside from the three strike anxiety, right?
Yeah,
For the
and
for the average player though, I'm really excited about this because I feel like this makes Brawl much more accessible to more of the player base.
I agree. And, even at the early levels, if you have the premium pass, the brawl is actually just straight profit for you early on,
Hmm.
which is great because hopefully that gets more people involved in the brawl, keeps the queue time short. The cost per match is very low, so people can experiment a little bit, and people can actually play it where they wouldn't have otherwise done so.
And it is one of my favorite ways to enjoy the game. So the idea of it being opened up to more of the player base just makes me happy. I think this is a good thing for the game.
It is, and it definitely uh, helps to shake some preconceived notions for me when I queue up in the brawl against somebody in gold and think, "Oh man, this is going to be a cakewalk," and uh, then it turns out, wait, no, I don't have level advantage over them anymore. I actually have to take this seriously and try.
Yeah, I actually have to admit, I've been sitting on upgrading overchargers to 5 because they've been gold bordered now for like 3 months. And when I saw that the warrior brawl was rodent, I was like, oh, okay, fine, I'll do it. I've been wanting to do it. I've been looking for an excuse. I'm like, fine, here's my excuse. It's in the brawl. And I did it, and then I realized it's
Oh
only level
no.
3. Oh,
Oh dear.
it's it's such a bad card at level 3, even in the even even against only level 3 stuff, because it's just the 2 points of damage isn't enough. So yeah, I ended up taking it out, but it was fine. I'm glad I have it because now I actually have a level 5 card in all 4 factions. I'm proud
Well,
to say.
congrats.
Thank
And
you.
that does actually bring up a good point too, which is
Hmm.
that if one of the brawls has a modifier you don't particularly enjoy, like you don't want to play the structure brawl because you feel like it's too random, it's not fun, you can
Oh,
just
very
skip it.
true.
Yeah, just do the other brawls instead. And that's
Yeah, my knights are really bad. Although this coming time maybe it'll be better. Like my Edric for the last time we had the Night Brawl was level 3. It was so painful pushing just to the 10 fusion stones. I'll probably skip that this coming time and just, if there is something better in the mythic or pardon me, the warrior brawl, I'll just jump to that. That's a great point.
all right. Well, let's move on to our card of the week. This is coming
Mm.
to us as a request from our friend in the Discord, Overdrive. And Overdrive wants to talk about sound drivers.
Well, this is the second half. We talked about the overchargers last week, or well, last episode. And so now this time we get the other half of his name with the sound drivers. And sound drivers are a 3 mana ironclad rare, because isn't everything in ironclad more expensive? Uh, it goes across the levels 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So just a straight linear progression. It has 0 movement. So it's more or less, I think, just sort of generic stats for the mana, right?
Yep.
But it does have a fun mechanic with it, which is on play, push forward the friendly unit on the tile in front.
This is a fun card. It really is. Having played a little bit of Ironclad, but not a ton, this is something that I did actually eventually end up working into the deck I was using, just because it worked aggressively. I was trying to play also along with this Ozone and Unhealthy Hysteria. You don't always have those two cards together as a combo. This is a way to bait your opponent into playing defense on their baseline so that
Oh,
Hysteria actually works without Ozone. You can just play a green prototypes and push it up onto their baseline and say, all right, if you ignore it, I'm gonna have front. If you don't have a clean trade into it, I'm gonna be able to Hysteria that into your base.
oh, I really like that. I had not thought about that. That is clever.
It works to move your front in a lot of ways that not much else will. I think cards like that are really valuable. We've talked about Azure Hatcher performing the same function in Shadowfen,
Hmm.
Zuri doing the same thing in Swarm. This is the ironclad answer for that. You do have Elot that can fly over, but there are limits there. Although there are positional limits around sound drivers also. So I guess it's not any better or worse, just different situations where they're useful. You have to have something else on the board. You can usually pair this with another cheap card, green prototypes, destructobots, gifted recruits, um, and just move your front. It's hard to turn that into a lethal combo unless your opponent is already very low. But it does move you in the late game, so you can kind of take that runner damage, leave your opponent low, and then surprise them by moving across the board.
Yeah, it's actually very good for cheap runner decks. You throw, like you said, a green prototypes are gifted, and then your saber paws now suddenly is within striking distance. So it's great for that sort of thing.
Yeah, not a generally useful card. It's not something that you can kind of just throw in any deck and make it work. But I really appreciate cards like this that turn the game into a positional puzzle. When you have to think about what is the best way to use this, and then take it one step further, and what's the best way to set up the usage here, so that on turn 4 I'm going to do this, so that on turn 5 I have the ability to make a trade, sound drivers it up, and get the win.
I think the most common use case with this, right, is Embers of Chaos.
Which is an expensive combo.
Hmm.
It's a good combo, don't get me wrong, but it's an expensive combo that doesn't play any defense or otherwise impact the board state. Uh, so you really better have been keeping up with your opponent up until that point.
The one thing I think Ironclad is very good at, though, is delaying, right? like with push, with ozone, but also with just like scrapped planners and debug loggers. You can force your opponent to have to wait an extra turn before getting to put units onto your baseline because
You know,
everything's just clogged up.
that is a great point. The cheap cards in Ironclad do seem to do a lot more. We talked about how it's still, really on the top of the meta for that reason. Right? You got these cheap, flexible tools that can be used defensively or offensively. They're very hard for your opponent to clear. They play great defense on your side of the board if you need to.
Yeah.
It's not difficult for sure to slow things down if you're playing an Ironclad deck.
Yeah, the problem with the Embers combo is that you are putting one health on your opponent's baseline. So that extra turn you bought yourself doesn't translate right away
No,
into
it
much.
is a terrifyingly slow tempo play.
It can be fantastic 2 turns from now, uh, but just doing the sound driver, the Embers into sound drivers play doesn't really threaten much, even for the following turn, right? Like
No,
your
you
opponent's like,
have to
"What?"
be in good shape before you make that play, and you have to have the ability to recover afterward from having made that play.
That's such a good way to put it. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot, so you better have a come from behind plan. But this card itself, ignoring the Embers combo, this card itself is just, I think, one of the more fun. And to your point, what makes this game so unique is positioning, and it's played on a board, not a table. And these kinds of cards, these kinds of mechanics that play around with position are some of the more engaging and fun cards in the game. So I love this card. I don't think it needs itself to be changed in
Nope.
order to see more play. I think it just needs. I feel like Embers is the best use case, but not that
Yeah,
great of a use
I'm
case.
not sure that Embers is the best use case just because Embers is so slow, and most of the
Mhm.
time for 7 mana, I'd be much happier if I, played a gifted and shot it up to the opponent's baseline and ran Saber Paws in, like that.
Sure. Yeah.
That probably works just as well most of the time, if not better.
Yeah, I can see that.
Definitely a card that we encourage you to try out. It's better than you think it is.
Oh, for sure. The other thing I really love about it, it's yet again a card that the main mechanic, the main reason for having it in your deck doesn't change with levels. So even if it's under leveled for you, like Frost Hexers was for me for so long, doesn't matter. It still freezes everything. This still pushes. Ozone still like
Yeah,
I like these kinds of cards.
agreed.
Well, that's going to end the main portion of this episode, which means it's time for me to remind you to contact us, preferably in our channel on the Stormbound Discord server or on Twitter at Brewed Sages. And you can email us at thebrewedsages@gmail.com. We also have an additional way for you to reach out and support us. We have a Gumroad account where you can become patrons of our work. Check out the link in our Stormbound Kitty page. That's actually going to do it for this episode. We have not received any fan mail since the last episode. For Sabaiku, I am Freeloader. We are the Brewed Sages reminding you to stay hydrated.